This is For Advisors by Advisors. I'm your host, Evan J. Mayer. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Eric Cornell. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks.
So again, I always give a little background on how I met the person that I'm talking to or why they're on the show today. And, initially when I had gone independent, I had met you, I want to say something like 4 or 5 months after I'd gone independent.
Yeah, I think you had just transitioned a few months earlier, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were actually on your second kind of look at the firm, and you had already looked, you were with partners actually initially when you looked. At the end of the day, that partnership didn't work out. And you decided, hey, I still want to look, but now I think I'm going to go on my own. And what was interesting about your situation was when you're recruiting and you're looking for advisors, and you were somebody I was looking at potentially joining my team, that they're normally in or they're out. And if they're in, they keep going.
Yeah.
But you went away for a while. And I think you were exploring the Ameriprise independent side and looking through that a little bit.
Correct. Yeah.
And thinking that might be an easier approach to first get into, which I'm gonna have you talk a little bit more about. And then all of a sudden, it was like 8 months went by, and I would talk to Joe every once in a while. I'd be like, "Hey, Joe, what's going on with Eric?" He's like, "I haven't heard from him." Like, oh, I guess Joe's not coming aboard, because normally that's what happens. The person goes away, and you called us. I want to say like during like Thanksgiving, and be like, "Hey, Evan, I haven't forgotten about you. I think we're coming aboard in a couple months." And we're like, whoa, what's going on? So it was a cool introduction. And your 1-year anniversary just went by.
Yeah. July 31st of 2022.
So take us back a little bit. When did you get started in the business? What roles were you in? You were with Ameriprise pretty much your whole career prior.
Yeah, 21 years up until the time of transition. Yeah. So it's a long-term relationship there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started in Philadelphia, started back in 2000, got licensed through American Express Financial Advisors at that point, and had a lot of good success, early success in the career. Brought on a lot of clients, but got really groomed for more of a leadership role. At the ripe old age of 24, I was relocated to Long Beach, California, took over that office as a district manager.
I got your Series 24 then?
No, at the time you didn't need it,
okay,
because they had somebody, a field vice president, who was actually overseeing multiple offices that did that.
Got it.
And with the help of a great team, we actually did really great things there, and I got the reputation of somebody who could turn offices around and really start to rebuild culture and get people recruited on board. And they reached out to me after about 4 years and asked me about relocating to Florida, which at the time was really imploding, the office in Boca. And so it came back to the East Coast. Decided
what year?
That this was 2007.
Okay.
2007, and ran the Boca Raton office for about a year and a half, and then decided on our honeymoon with my wife, decided that I was going to go back into personal practice because we wanted to have some freedom, not have to work 80, 90 hours a week anymore. And that got me here, and then started a practice, and the rest is history.
That was obviously some sort of income hit.
Big one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It went from mid hundreds to 150, 170,000, all the way back to 70 grand.
So that was starting back in 09?
That was back in 08, actually.
08.
Yeah.
So you started with basically no assets.
Zero assets, zero clients.
And just started ramping up.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so you were with Ameriprise for long. And obviously when you're in a firm, Merrill Lynch as an example, you get stuck to the culture of the firm a little bit. You've been independent now for a year.
Yeah.
And I've already seen you thaw a little bit from it, but not fully thaw yet, because you were there for a long time. Do you notice that in yourself? Like,
I do. Yeah. Now it's, instead of showing up in suits every day, it's if I don't have any appointments or any appointments that with new clients, prospective clients, I'm dressed in the polo and the jeans, and it's nice to be casual.
And when you made the move, you initially were thinking of going to Ameriprise independent, and obviously you started with the partners about going independent at some point. What year did that start, where you started going, this employee channel thing is not for me?
I guess I would say probably 2016, primarily because we were in a spot where we were doing probably 2 million in production, getting a lot of pushback for a lot of different things. Really nothing that was, in our opinion, relevant. To have 7 people sign off on a UPS going out.
Yeah.
When you're a $2 million producer and they're taking 50% of that for override. Was not real exciting to us. And so that's when we really, when I started heavily looking into the independent route. And over time, it was just making sure that we had all our T's crossed, I's dotted, knew what different firms had different strengths, what strengths those were, how they played into our business at the time. And just collected that information over a period of years, really. And although some of it changes, a lot of it doesn't.
I was looking at the leaderboard of top independent firms as far as assets and revenue. I saw this on, what's that email I get every morning? I don't know if you get it too. I think it's Financial Advisor Digest or magazine.
Yep.
there's always a headline on there and you're like, oh, that's a top headline.
Yeah.
So I went on there and Ameriprise surprisingly was number 2 in assets on their independent side. But from our conversations in the past, that independent side is not purely independent. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. And this was actually something that probably sent us closer to the finish line with some other firms because of it. But having worked at the firm for Ameriprise for 20 years, we were always told, and that this was from the very beginning, is the idea was you stay in the P1 or the employee channel for a couple of years, and then the expectation is that you go to the franchise channel or what they called the independent channel. And randomly, I got on a plane that was headed, I think, out west, and I just by chance happened to sit next to a gentleman. I was reading a book at the time called Succession Planning, and he had noticed the title. And he asked me, he was, tapped me on the shoulder. He said, hey, are you an advisor? I was like, yeah, I am. I've been doing this for a while. He said, I've read that book. It's a good book. He said, what firm are you with? And I said, Ameriprise. And he said, me too. Come to find out, he was working out of, I think it was Kansas City. And he had been with the franchise channel in the franchise platform for 20 years. And so I started asking him some questions. And lo and behold, I ended up asking him, recently I've been looking at some other firms. The payouts are obviously higher and your haircut is lower at some of these other companies. Why do you continue to stay with Ameriprise? And his answer to me was, my market group has a very aggressive retention strategy. And I said, what do you mean? They're your clients. All you got to do is change the name on the door. And he said, oh no, that's not how it works. He said, there's a reason why they call it a franchise and that it's not called independent. And come to find out after 20 years of being told one thing and then finally being told by somebody who was in the role that, listen, you don't own your clients ever. If the only way that you own your clients is that if you sell your practice within Ameriprise.
Which you have to sell to an Ameriprise advisor.
Correct. Yeah. And that just blew me away. That was a very impactful moment for me, knowing that I essentially felt like I'd been lied to for 15 years. So
interesting. And was the P&L also not as good as you were thinking?
Correct. Yeah. The haircuts, they take global admin fees. It's not only based on the size of your practice, but it's also based on the size of the client's accounts. I recently met with one of my friends from Ameriprise, and he was telling me his haircut on his managed money is 20 basis points.
Yeah.
Which is it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. Yeah.
It's crazy. And the franchise fees, actually, I think that's also almost proprietary to Ameriprise, and the fact that I don't think there's other independent firms that charge a franchise fee.
Yep.
Yeah. So interesting. And Wells Fargo is now coming out with this, and not saying that theirs is going to be the same or different, but it's things to look out for and things to search. Actually, we had somebody on yesterday. We were talking about the P&L, and you might want to talk about that a little bit too, as far as when you were looking at the different firms to potentially go independent. You really have to look at what those hidden fees are and those hidden layers are, because that 90 to 95% payout, when you're doing $1 million to $2 million in production, you would think you could get that easily. And the truth is,
you do, but not after everything else.
Not after everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. They definitely make it a point to leave those parts out.
Yeah. And when you're growing, especially, and you're trying to establish your independent firm, your numbers could easily go into the 50s, 60s net after employees, rent, and phones, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
Taxation could be a little different, obviously, which is always a positive.
Yeah.
Now, you interestingly made the move like after the pandemic, but still people were scared. People were just getting their vaccines.
Yeah. It was actually an opportune moment for us. Number one, and again, you can look at glass half full, glass half empty, right? But glass half full is people weren't seeing people in the offices. Even the people, as they were coming after our clients, trying to retain them, inviting them in for a meeting to sit down and go over anything was impossible, which helped us out a lot, I think. And in that said, I also leaned on the fact that, hey, listen, our office is open. We can actually have people come in. And if you want to come on in, see us and make sure that you get a feel for the legitimacy of what we're doing in the office and the practice.
And you don't meet many holistic advisors out there. I think when you are holistic with clients, everybody says they're holistic, but you as an advisor know that 9 out of 10 are probably not.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about financial planning? You're huge into it. I'm huge into it. You do something a little different than I do in the concept that you have things staggered where you sometimes will charge for planning services depending upon the situation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we really try to give clients an option in regards to how their relationship is structured with us. And so when we do meet with a prospective client, and this goes for every client that we've met and have brought on since 2008, we give them some choices. And not everybody is, as much as we love the fact that we're referral only at this point, Not everybody is running to the door saying, hey, take $1 million and go manage it. So what we did is we gave them a little bit of a lesser barrier of entry, so to speak. And the way that we've structured it is we offer multiple relationships or types or the option of multiple relationship. Number one is financial planning, straight financial planning, where we have designed a menu of services. It's 3 tier levels. One is extremely basic, which is going to be just the GPM software, the financial planning software that we use in our practice.
Money Guide Pro.
Yeah, Money Guide Pro.
Yeah.
And it's retirement planning focused. It's how much, here's how much I have. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's my timeline. Am I saving enough? And are my investments essentially structured the right way from an asset allocation perspective? Now, there's no active management involved in that. It's basically advisory only. We take a look at it. Yes, you're good. Make some changes here. We'll see in 6 months. But again, a lot of people want that. They want the ability to know that they're on track. For that service, for that basic tier 1, we charge $1,850. $1,850.
Has that changed from when you left to where you are now?
No, not from what. So it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to use it as a loss leader almost.
Yes.
Where it was, I think we started at $600, and again, it was just more of a loss leader. It was like, listen, you get the foot in the door, somebody's made a commitment, you get the data, you're able to find out more about their situation and gather assets. Now, because of where we're at, it's more of a, hey, listen, we got to get paid for our time that we spend.
Yeah.
So that's where the figure comes in. It's more of a how much on average hourly we spend on each case. And then we have tier 2 is the true comprehensive service. So it's going to be the current financial position. It's going to be tax planning. It's going to be investment planning, retirement, insurance evaluation, so on and so forth. And that is generally going to be 4 meetings a year. It's not versus the semi-annual. And we charge $29.50 for that. And then we have a very advanced service, which is mainly designed for business owners that are going to be 15 or more employees, senior executives with some relatively unique retirement plans, rabbi trusts, deferred comps, especially when they get stock options, NQSOs, ISOs. And we charge $10,800 for that. But that we generally meet every other month. And that would be a face-to-face meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's a unique strategy because most financial planners wait till they have assets in before they start planning. And the truth is, I always think that's a bad approach because you want to get to know the client a little bit before you bring them on.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you give them a few different options gives them the flexibility and the feeling like, hey, I like that option better than that.
Yeah.
Option.
And then obviously we do the asset management and they want to bring in assets. Great. We do charge both a financial planning fee and an asset management percentage for anything under 500,000.
Yeah.
And once they hit 500,000, we provide that tier 1 level service for asset or for financial planning as an added value.
That's great.
Yeah.
Talk about your team. Now you're expanding. You're in just over a year and you're bringing on people significantly. So talk a little bit about expansion and kind of what you've done so far.
We have always been, with the help of some great teammates. Margaret Scaparrotti is my director of operations. I have Josephine Tronaby, who's an analyst for us at this point, or is moving into that role. And then we have Catherine Jones, who's our front office manager. John is our business manager, et cetera. But we've always been very big on the processes and systems, and specifically around how we operate the office on an ongoing basis, which makes it very scalable. And when you have those systems and processes in place, and everybody's clear on their roles and responsibilities, it gets very easy to start to just plug people in, and they can plug in and they can actually operate efficiently because everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
And plug in means advisors giving them turnkey.
Joining the office. Yeah. Joining the office, giving them turnkey processes, marketing, et cetera. Being in, I can't forget to mention Elena, my wife, who's our event planner. But again, just very, very streamlined the way that we've done it. And people appreciate that. They appreciate the ease of being able to make that transition. And that's given us the capabilities of being able to go out and market ourselves pretty efficiently in terms of, listen, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to set up the office. You don't need to figure out the phone system. You don't need to figure out HR. We have that. That's something that's available to you as soon as you start to work with us.
Absolutely. And one of the niches, we always talk about niches in this business. It's almost a niche to have a niche. One of your niches is that you like doing client events and you like doing them often.
Yeah.
Probably monthly. I think you do a different client event and they're unique and they're fun. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are there and how you decide who comes and who doesn't come? And
I'll premise this with, we've been referral only for probably 6 years now. And it's very important to us that, when we do bring on a new client, that we have an endorsement of character and values from a current client. That's been our main go-to. But when I was with Ameriprise, when we ran the offices, we did a lot of seminars. We did a lot of events on an ongoing basis. And eventually it transitioned into something called seminar series. which was a monthly turnkey dinner where we would have a wholesaler come in and be able to do a presentation about a particular product or strategy or just an agenda item. But it was meant for the entire office. And if you wanted to invite people, you could. And the price of admission really was to bring a friend or a guest. Now, we don't do it that way anymore. The fact is that we've been able to continually acquire clients through referrals that are received from our current clients without those events. So those are, I would even deem it almost client appreciation to a certain extent. Now, people do bring guests, of course, and it's a very easy way to facilitate an introduction. But what we do is we latch on essentially to an idea and we run with it. And you're right, we do it about monthly. But the premise behind that and the frequency was really based on those seminar series, which I actually helped design that marketing strategy for Ameriprise at a national level. And really, you find something that you can have that's fun, like you said. So, for example, this month we have a virtual tequila tasting that's coming up, and where clients will let us know that they want to participate. We have the ability of providing their information to a distillery, and what they do is they send out the tequila. There's 2 bottles of tequila that they'll get. They can invite some guests over, and then from there they sign on to a Zoom meeting on a specific day at a specific time. We have a tequila expert that gets on and does a 45-minute presentation on those 2 bottles of tequila. So fun event, gets people involved, gets the weekend kicked off pretty nice. But the amount of traction that we get with introductions from that is everybody on Zoom. And if you notice somebody in the background and you follow up the next day with your client and say, hey, by the way, who was that?
Yep.
It generates a lot of good opportunities.
And it's interesting, you call them client appreciation events, but that's what they are. And as somebody myself that does these type of events, you get to a point where you don't need the referrals anymore because you've built that up. The younger generation of advisors that don't have that size book, that could be a huge advantage of getting clients around, creating those relationships. Because at the end of the day, this is a relationship business.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, when you look at advisors, you've been in management, now you were in the employee channel for a while. Obviously, when you're in the employee channel, you get to see the difference between good advisors and bad advisors. What are
quite a bit?
Yeah. Well, other than personality, what are the strengths of good advisors that the bad advisors don't have?
Wow, that's a big question, but a good one. I guess right off the bat, my first impression would be probably processes, systems in place. One of the things that I think as advisors we do is we get caught up. We get engulfed in certain aspects of the business. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that for a certain period of time, but when it starts to overwhelm us to the point where we forget what our actual main role is, which is asset gathering and giving clients advice, and then more advisors die than grow. So processes and systems are big. Number 2, I would say is, they spend too much time trying to think about what they actually want to say. A lot, what you'll notice and something that, that people notice about me is if you sat in 15 meetings with me, you would realize that pretty much everything I say is the same. It's different in different ways to different clients, but at the same time, if I have a message that I want to deliver, I deliver it the same way every time. So I don't have to think about it. You don't have to spend your time thinking. You can spend your time actually looking at somebody and reading their body language and keeping your ears open for referral opportunities. One thing that's interesting, and by the way, the third item that I would probably point out is where you spend your time. Meaning, do you spend your time on the areas that are going to make you the most money, right? Are you to spend your time on the areas that are going to be the most impactful from a business growth perspective? And with that, I would probably lead into referrals. Do you ask for referrals? Do you spend your time trying to generate referrals and introductions with clients that you currently have that are happy, or do you never talk about it? What's interesting is I did a sample size, and this was probably maybe 8 years ago. I was big into tracking because I spent a lot of time in management, so that was something that was just ingrained in my head. But I spent an entire year trying to figure out, or essentially ascertaining, was there a legitimate difference between people that called in, like referrals that were calling referrals that clients had given our name to, and they called in and asked for an appointment, and referrals that I had actually specifically asked, not unsolicited versus solicited. And what I found is over that year is that the clients that we brought on that were solicited referrals generated 5 times more revenue than the ones that were unsolicited. So putting myself in a position where I was able to actually identify people and identify opportunities as I was talking to clients during meetings to be able to solicit them for an introduction, it's just a better use of time. or ended up being a better use of time.
And when you say solicit, does that mean you're calling the client? Or
No, more listening for names and people that they mention in stories that they're telling you, where you say, oh, by the way, you mentioned Bob earlier. Do you think Bob would be open to a conversation with me? It sounds like you two are pretty close.
Yeah.
So that's the solicited part. Now, and it's sometimes normally what I'll tell them is, listen, let me have Bob's number. And if you could do me a favor, ask him if he's open to a 10-minute phone call. And if he is, great. But I'm not going to call him until I hear from you.
Yeah. So it's a warm lead.
Correct.
Basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. There's different schools of thought on how you do it, and practice size makes a big difference too. You're managing $800 million. You get to a point where you can only you don't want referrals anymore. you want
you only want certain ones.
You only want certain ones, and and I always, I might have said it to you. I always find that I only take referrals by, or I'm not taking any more referrals this year. If somebody came to you with $10 million, are
you going to work with them?
Yeah, but Michael Jordan comes to you and says, "Hey, Eric, I'd like you to, put $100 million away for me. Can you do it?" No, Michael.
I'm not taking on referrals this year.
Yeah, I'm not taking on anybody. Yeah, sure. Okay. It's great marketing, but at the end of the day, conceptually, you're putting your clients in their best foot forward. And if you do that, the clients are going to be very open to giving you referrals, ask for it or not. And maybe you get more when you do ask, right?
Yeah. A few more. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Is there anything we did not get to on this podcast that if you wanted to, you're speaking to advisors from everywhere, the insurance channel, bank channel, independent channel. If there was one piece of advice you could give advisors out there on any topic, what would it be?
Probably the concept of the 4 habits of referability. And again, that's coming back to, no, I've never heard it's just like you've never heard anybody complain about having too much money for retirement. You'll never have anybody complain, to your point, about, listen, I get too many referrals. I have too many new clients. And again, whether you take them on or not is up to you. Always say please and thank you. People, I think, especially advisors, tend to forget that. It's not the clients as much as you are advising them, and you're working for them. So make sure that you're respectful of that. Show up on time. I don't, my first mentor once told me, and this was maybe just a Philly thing, I think it doesn't apply in California and maybe not apply in Florida, which is if you're early, you're late. And if you're late, don't bother showing up. And he lived by that. If somebody was, if it's important enough, you'll figure out a way. You'll figure out a way to make it on time. And in that sense, always being in a situation where you underpromise and overdeliver. That's huge. Making sure that you are never in a position where you don't live up to a commitment that you make to a client specifically, and especially. You can probably use that in every aspect of life. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, do what you say you will. Right. Yep. So it just comes down to making sure that if you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. And people appreciate that, especially nowadays.
And I'm gonna ask the same question, but I'm gonna ask it in a different audience. New advisors, brand new to the business, 23, 24, 25, 26 years old, just out of college, getting ready. As far as you're concerned today, what kind of channels are the best channels for them to be in? And should they go at it alone, or should they join a mentor?
Yeah, my advice would be join a team. I don't know if there are any companies or BDs out there right now that are actually hiring novice advisors. They used to be all the time, right? It used to be Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Ameriprise, I'm sure Northwestern, Mutual, but there was tons of them. Nowadays, there's not a ton. And the best thing you could do is try to learn from somebody who's been in the business for 15, 20 years, because that's the person who's going to but make sure it's somebody who's growing. Make sure it's somebody who's actually value-based, not making decisions for themselves, but making decisions on behalf of the clients and in the best interest of the clients, right? Yep. That would be my guidance, would be find a team, find a practice, find a company that you really believe from a values perspective is in line with yours. And latch on. And the best thing you could do would be to grow with them. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. And always client first. If it's not client first, if you're learning from a mentor that's not client first, your career is not going to end up very well.
Correct. Yeah.
Eric, it was an absolute pleasure. Of course, man. If anybody have any questions or want to be able to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
I'm always open to an email. It's Eric, ERIC.Cornell, CORNELL at Helius, HELIUS, WM as in wealthmanagement.com.
Excellent. And as always, any guests we have on, if you want to email us any questions, we're happy to get you in touch with Eric as well. Eric, we learned a lot today. As an independent advisor that just did it 3 years ago, and I got to be there for you a little bit. And
you were awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and see some of how you went through it and your processes and how they were unique. It's the same, but also different than mine. Yeah. I thought that was really neat to see. Look, there's a different way you can do it. It can still be successful, but they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the process doesn't have to be the same, but the outcome a lot of times is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as always, you could follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and obviously this podcast will be on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, all over the place. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you for the next one.